Good morning. My name is Richard Schramm, and I'm the service coordinator today, your guide to today's service. Welcome to the North Universalist Chapel Society, the North Chapel, where we aspire to be a congregation that nurtures the growth and supports the needs of its members, sustains a strong spiritual life within a loving church community, and seeks to have a positive impact on the world around us. So welcome to everyone. A special welcome to those who are visiting. If you are up for it, you perhaps could stand, introduce yourself, and say where you're from. I'll give you a chance. You don't have to, obviously. Okie doke. If there are visitors here, if you could sign the guest book in the back of the sanctuary, that'd be very much appreciated. We are following COVID restrictions, masking, social distancing, and we're not having a choir, obviously, and we'll be humming rather than singing. As Jessica calls it, we'll be using the hymnal instead of the hymnal. So Chloe Powell is here to work with the kids, and they'll be going out right after the chalice lighting. If you have cell phones, please turn them off. Now for announcements, see the order of service. There are a number of announcements there, and check out the church website. I do have one special announcement about the stewardship drive. We hope you've heard about the 2022 Stewardship Pledge Drive and maybe even completed your pledge. If you have, we say a big thank you to you. If you want to know more about the Stewardship Pledge Drive, you can find information on the table at the back of the church, or you can read about it in the church website. You'll also find pledging information in the weekly In Touch. For 2022, our goal is to raise $145,000 to support church programs and operations. As of this morning, we have raised $59,202 with 33 pledges toward our goal. We're on our way. If you need a form to make your pledge, you can find one in the colored envelopes right in front of you in the pews. Just drop your commitment form in the collection plate this morning or mail it to the church office. We're very grateful for your support. In the announcements in the order of service, note that there is something called a passion directory, which you might consider completing. Leon's reflection today is entitled The Tender Sides of Gratitude. It's an appropriate Thanksgiving theme. It's a time for grace and gratitude. Each is so important, they seem to need each other. And for some questions you might think about at this point are, for what are we most grateful? How do we find grace and thanks?
good morning, and good Sunday. I hope that this new day finds you well. I was reading through an old book that I got in seminary, and I came across a passage where my teacher wrote, the Bible promises, "You shall be like a watered garden whose springs never run dry." It teaches that we can be part of a cascading stream by which justice will flow down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. If I could ask just one question of us this morning, my honest question and deepest gratitude would be this. What will we do with our gifts? I'm gonna pause this particular cell phone camera and come down there if that's okay. So I have a little bit of a thing about, it's fun to be behind the pulpit because it's easy to hide my nervous legs. And so if I snap my toes or fidget or kick out, please don't be surprised. This is just the way I am, the way I've always been. Deepest gratitude is hardest for me sometimes. It seems that gratitude has a shell that's sometimes hard for me to penetrate. But the tender sides of gratitude show up for me in laughter. This week, for some reason, what really got me was a poem that I was hoping that Richard Schramm would choose to recite, but I could see why he wouldn't. It was not written by Shakespeare. It goes, "Turkey, turkey, look at you. Please be careful what you do. Thanksgiving Day is almost here, and we eat turkey every year. So go and hide out in the woods, and we'll eat pizza like we should." It made me laugh. It made me think about gratitude, about when we are most graceful, and about how we find grace and offer thanks. Especially now with all that we're going through. Now, the soft underbelly of the COVID experience for me was revealed about a year ago, long before vaccination was something that we chose to argue about. It was the summer of 2020. It was a time of isolation, and I had lost something that I loved. For years, I've been helping to lead the senior teens high school youth group at Star Island at a conference that takes place in mid-July. It's terrifying to me. I try to play it cool, but I always get so nervous. I am afraid that I will say or do the wrong thing or say something stupid. I'm afraid that I won't be able to connect with young folks from behind all of this gray, which feels new to me, even though it's not. I have a powerful denial. Every year I've been terrified, and every year it's turned out great. Breaking through those fears and boundaries and finding one another again in the sanctuary of our lives and on the softball playing field. In life's unlikely encounters in which we reveal ourselves undefended, tender, and vulnerable and real. That's why I'm trying to sit before you right now. I'm trying to be undefended, tender, vulnerable, and real. Now I have tons of stories about the youth group, about things that worked out just great. I suppress a lot of the stories about the disasters. I have stories about how things were going wrong and we crashed and burned, but I don't tell them very often. Life has its ups and downs, to be sure, but the stories of disaster are harder for me to tell. I prefer the stories of success. The everything worked out well enough in the end kind of stories. Who doesn't? Summer camp is one of these stories, generally, and we work hard to make it turn out that way, but we utterly failed in 2020. We were all on serious lockdown then. We were in the COVID throes of things. We had theories about how dangerous the virus was and how it was transmitted, and we were arguing about it. Things were getting really bad, especially in Italy and in Seattle. We were scared, and we went into lockdown mode. Do you remember how shut down we were that summer? Scrubbing our hands and sanitizing and cleaning the surfaces of things so rigorously with witch hazel and rubbing alcohols, stockpiling N95 masks and toilet paper. We were fearful and in serious denial, and we still are, but we're trying to change. Change takes time, and even though time takes lives, we are still slow to change. We knew that there was a right way of doing things, but we didn't know exactly what that right way was. We were freaking out back then, back in the summer of 2020. And here in the almost wintertime of 2021, things are different, but back then, I really wanted to hang out at Star Island, and I couldn't. You see, for years I've been helping to lead the youth group with a longtime friend of mine named Amelia Foreman Stiles. I first met Amelia back in 1994, before I started really learning about grace and gratitude. Grace and gratitude. You know, it's funny. When Richard Schramm and I, where are you? I can't find you. Oh, there you are. When Richard Schramm and I first started talking about how things would unfold this morning, we talked about what we were going to do with the chalice lighting. And I have some words that I tend to use, but I can be flexible about that. I do like the ritual, though. I like things that are static and unchanging, so that we can notice how we change around those things. Back at my home church in New Jersey, when I was growing up, we didn't have the chalice lighting ritual. It wasn't part of UU services yet. My colleague and friend Dan Hotchkiss has written, many people are surprised to learn that the chalice lighting is, as a part of the worship service, found its way into Unitarian Universalist congregations only in the early 1980s. I first started going to church in 1972. I was 7. So for me, even though I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist, the chalice lighting still feels kind of new. I first started taking it seriously, though, in North Carolina when I was in my mid-30s. I thought that the ritual was pretty cool, and I liked that the chalice was associated with the warmth of human community, with the light of truth that burns within us all in life. I was thankful for that. I used to like knowing that this fire was never really extinguished at the end of the service, but born within us, within our hearts all the time. I still like the thought that this fire of commitment, this flame that burns here, this morning in the 21st century, is an example of what Emerson called the divine spark way back in the 19th century. So it's an old flame, so to speak, and I like the continuity of that. It helps the hymns that we sing and hum make good sense. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passions need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. The fire of commitment, that flame that burns within, this is what the chalice symbolizes. Anyway, Richard and I were planning what we were going to do this morning, and we didn't talk about this history. It was not a failing on our part, it was deeper than that. We don't always have to be explicit. We don't always have to say things that we deeply believe with our words. We can show them with our actions. It's much more powerful this way, because language does not always serve us well. Language helps us to bend the truth in a way that action does not. It's hard for me to say this with words, but the chalice and its fire, its gentle flame that burns within, I see this, and I feel this every time that I see Richard. Every time that I see each and every one of you. And I see it when we see each other. So Richard isn't special in this way. Don't get me wrong, he's pretty cute. and I'm very fond of him. But the fire that I see in his eyes burns as beautifully within us all. Within us all, no exceptions. So, if you, like me, think that Richard Schramm is pretty beautiful, you should know that he is a reflection and a refraction of the light that burns within, of the beauty that we have within ourselves. This is how it works. Love thy neighbor means precisely this. I left North Carolina in June of 2005. I went to seminary in California, and there my chalice lighting habits deepened. We gathered every week for student-led worship services, and these services were as varied as we were ourselves. They were weirder and wilder than I can possibly explain to you, and each was sacred in their own way. I was touched differently each time, but the thing that held them all together week after week and year after year was the chalice lighting ritual. At seminary, the words were always the same. You might recognize them. We said, with the kindling of this flame, we reaffirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude, and to use them to bless the world in the spirit of love. Blessing the world, that phrase, it's a big Rebecca Parker thing. Rebecca Parker was my teacher in California. She wrote a book. She wrote a whole book on the subject. She blessed the world all the time. It actually became annoying on really bad days in seminary. She blessed the world by way of grace and gratitude. And she explained this herself. She wrote, "Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or to curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of hands, the reach of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry and bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise the sacred, or do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door and hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question. What will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world." End quote. Deepest gratitude requires my yielding and the acceptance of loss and sacrifice, and I hate that. It's horrible for my ego, and it's glorious for my soul. It's up to us which way we will choose to go. It's up to you, and it's up to me, just as it was up to Kyle Rittenhouse in Wisconsin. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'll get further into it in a minute. This is why deepest gratitude is hard. At some point it might be more fun to learn more about the chalice and its light, more about its history and its significance in Europe, especially in the run-up to World War II. We could learn about its champions, Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha. Waitstill, that's a name. I want to be Waitstill. We could learn about the refugee named Hans Deutsch and Reverend Joy, who he was working with. The lighting of the chalice is not just a ritual, it's not just something you tend to do. It's more than that, it's a powerful thing, and historically it's a dangerous thing. It was compassionate and deeply beautiful, and it remains so still today. In any case, like I said earlier, the tender sides of gratitude show up to me in laughter. I was working closely with my friend Amelia at the time. She and I were leaders of a youth group in 2020, but COVID shut that down. All of our conferences were canceled that year. Amelia and I both knew that we were losing something special, so we put our heads together and we searched for ways of fighting back. Slowly we arrived at an obvious solution. Zoom, of course, but Zoom with a little bit of a twist. Okay. You see, Amelia lives in Blue Hill, Maine, which is about 300 miles from here, 6 hours. And the young folks that we had in the youth group were spread out all across the country, mostly in New England, but also in Northern California, and in Salt Lake City, Utah, in New Orleans, all over. So Zoom made the most obvious and the most practical sense. Just about every time zone would be tuning in on that day, so we had to pick the time strategically. We picked a time that didn't exclude anyone, and then the word went out, and everyone tuned in, and everything was going according to plan. True to form, we started off with a check-in and a chalice lighting. Our gathering ritual was still the same. We checked in by answering questions. How are you doing? Where is your home? And of course, my favorite, what is your favorite soup? After everyone checked in, we would try to get a little deeper, and to do this, we planned to light the chalice. We didn't have words that we always used, but Amelia always read poetry. That was our ritual. That's what we had been doing for years. I think the world of Amelia, and I even wrote part of a song about her. I've shared it with you. The song is called Best of My Heart. I play it on the slide guitar. It's about a little boy in the first verse, a little boy with a flame that burned within. Oh, how he tried to hold his light inside, but life is so mystified and free. No one controls the boy loves so bold that he washes the soul of me. The washing of the soul, the thought alone, seems to offer mercy, the joy-based washing clean of the human soul. I can feel the release that happens within me at just the thought. The chorus was a sing-along, it's a hum-along these days. Because I just can't break like a bone anymore, and I just can't sink like a stone. I'm gonna pack up my sorrows, throw down my guns, and pick up the best of my heart. The second verse is the one I wrote for Amelia. Oh, how she burns with graces unearned, tossed by the turning sea. Only the angels can face life so sober and true, embracing the sun and the moon with me. She is my friend. The song is about the power of grace and gratitude and forgiveness, and I shared it with the youth group. I wish I could have shared it with Kyle Rittenhouse. Before he left his home in Illinois, loaded for bear, and before he arrived in Kenosha, I wish I could have asked him to pack up his sorrows and to throw down his guns. There have been times when I've been angry, but I've figured out a way to get through. I wish I could have shared this experience with Kyle before he shot those people and before he killed those two men and wounded another. I wish that I or someone closer to him could have loved him away from such terrible violence, could have taught him how to pack up his sorrow and throw down his guns before he took life at the age of 17. So the song came out in spurts. A half a line here and a half a chorus there. And then I asked the youth group to help me out, but they weren't into it. I did well enough without them, but I was a little bummed to have to write the song all by myself, but I did just fine. I share a lot of music with the youth group, and Amelia shares a lot of poetry. So there we were on this Zoom call in July of 2020, a month before Kenosha, and at the height of the COVID lockdown with no Star Island conference in sight. And the Zoom call was great and everything, but it was mediocre as a substitute. It was nice to see everyone, but I couldn't hug them. We knew going in that the Zoom call alone would never be enough, not to fight back against the heaviness that we were experiencing, but it was a start. Only the joy of laughter would lead us to the light and to the lightness. But how to inspire that? how to inspire laughter, we did not know. How does one inspire laughter in times of sorrow? We didn't know the answer to that question when we started planning, but we figured something out as the process unfolded. After checking in about how we were and where we were and yummy soups, Amelia and I planned a little mischief. We staged a fight. It was out of character for both of us. She and I are dearest friends, and the youth group picks up on that energy. They can feel it, and they like it, and it's good for them. They sense how much we care for one another, and that extends to them. And on our Zoom call, though, we changed all of that around. It was a little mean, but playfully so. The plan was simple. After checking in, after the check-in that showed that we were scattered all across the country, Amelia would read a poem, and then I would light the chalice. She was to read something beautiful, and then I was to drop the ball. Okay. The poetry was lovely, but then things started heating up. I said, I'm supposed to light the chalice, but I said on the Zoom call, but I can't seem to find any matches anywhere. And right away, Amelia took issue with this, and she started in with me. We went over this, Leon. What do you mean you can't find any matches? And then we started to fight. Okay. We weren't vulgar, but it was ugly. Uncomfortable. It lasted for about 20 seconds or so. And then the youth group started freaking out. They were silent, and they were absolutely still, as Amelia and I were pretending to fight with one another. And then finally she shouted something righteous and annoying, like something like, do I have to do everything for you? And she was pretty escalated at this point. Then angrily she stood up in front of her computer and she picked up a book of matches and she stormed out of the Zoom computer frame. Now, she'd made a bit of a scene and she was leaving us with this. And she's a good actor and she can be pretty convincing. Now, unbeknownst to everyone on the call, except Amelia and I, the day before, Amelia had driven from Blue Hill, Maine, to my house in Vermont. She was staying in my guest room downstairs at the time of the call. No one knew this but she and I. It was our little secret. So moments after she stormed right out of her Zoom frame, presumably in Blue Hill, Maine, she stormed right into my Zoom frame and blew everybody's mind. It was awesome. It seemed like she had made the 300-mile, 6-hour journey to my house in seconds. And she handed me a book of matches, and then she kissed me on the top of my head, and then she walked back to Blue Hill, Maine, which was conveniently located across the way in my guest room. The tension broke immediately, and everyone just burst out laughing. We brought in the light together. We brought in the light with our laughter. In the language of the theology that I learned in California, we chose to bless the world in a spirit of love. Afterwards, we were all so beautifully open with one another. They were afraid that she and I were really fighting, and they hated that. We learned a little bit about the hard power of conflict, and we learned a whole lot about the soft power of peace, and we were thankful. We learned about the tender sides of gratitude. It is the tender side of gratitude that calls us beyond the petty wars in life, that calls us beyond the battlefields that are prepared for us, that calls us past the pitfalls that guides us and guides us over the sand traps where the joy of life can get stuck and stranded sometimes. Now, what has happened in Kenosha is a tragedy. A young kid named Kyle armed himself and drove to a protest in Wisconsin. And in that protest, tempers flared and he killed 2 people and shot a third. The court case just ended a few days ago, and Kyle was found not guilty by a jury of his peers. This is a petty war that became deadly in only seconds and is now a battlefield on which the joys of life are stuck and stranded. And the whole thing makes me sad. So I reached out for some help. I reached out to Owen Daniel McCarter. I don't know if you know him. He's one of the he's a part of this community. He's started attending over the summer or recently. I'm not sure. Owen, you'll have to tell me. I know he's going to watch online. But Owen and his partner Jesse are the lead babes at Babes Bar in Bethel, which is an awesome place to be. And I love laughing in that place. I love the people who come from all walks of life who laugh and bring the good light in. I reached out to Owen because I feel stronger when I do, and because he thinks so deeply about things, and because he is so wise, and because he loves so boldly and all, and of course because he is from Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the terrible tragedy is unfolding. Now, I recognize, and we recognize, that we are ruled by laws. But when we are wise enough to be humble, we know that we are only ever average students at best, wandering around in robes, in churches and in courtrooms, sounding furiously at the heavens and slamming down our gavels, and making holy fools of ourselves some of the time, in front of juries and before the eyes of God. But we are not yet kind enough, gentle enough, strong enough, loving enough to tell a sobbing 17-year-old boy that he is too young to play with guns. So to Joseph and to Anthony, who died on that day, and to Gage, who was severely wounded, and to those who love them, Carrie Ann Swart and Susan Hughes and Hannah Giddings. Surely time and love will keep us all awash in tears. But maybe our prayers for justice, the ones that seem to go unanswered, will gather and roll down like waters soon enough. Perhaps they will gather themselves into an ever-flowing stream. Our prayer of peace might be too slow to find that which is best in us right now, but over time we will discover that best of our own hearts. To all of us who know and love and care for this world passionately and honestly, may we find the strength to love one another away from violence. May we encourage the boldness to express our love to one another, the love that holds us all in community. May we find a way to talk to one another, to get over some bad ideas, the bad ideas that lead to brutal consequences. May we love the world so boldly, and may we bless it in the spirit of love for all that is our life. May we choose to bless the world. And may we keep in mind the tender sides of gratitude as we do. And may we keep in mind that ever and always, no matter how great the climb, there are solutions that will come to us along the way. So the important thing to do is to get on the road and not lose the faith, because on the road we will learn to let the good light in. May it be so. Blessed be and amen.